What's up, everybody? Brett here, back today. Happy to be bringing you another Total War Warhammer 2 replay. A game I just played versus Bade Il Oba. I don't know what that name's supposed to be, but I named this replay Beastly because that's indeed what it was. Let me go ahead and slow-mo this for a little bit here. In honor of the upcoming Silence and the Fury DLC, I was really feeling like I needed to play some Beastmen, and play some Beastmen I did. I have a pretty, I don't know, kind of standard but very Minotaur heavy build here that I want to go over in a second, but my opponent's build really stood out to me and I wanted to go over it. I've seen lots of ranged kiting builds for the greenskins in the meta, and that's what my opponent did bring. I can see that being very good versus most Beastmen compositions. Unfortunately, my entire army basically is shielded and kind of ready for this sort of thing. My opponent has 4 groups of the Forest Goblin Spider Rider Archers and 2 groups of the Goblin Wolf Riders. Paired together, you get the nice slow from the poison and the speed from the wolves. Kind of helps you to tie down anything you want, but also to stay away from anything that might beat them in melee. His front line is going to be just 4 groups of goblins. You know, that's 1,200 gold. That's not much to get 4 honestly pretty decent units versus low caliber Beastmen infantry. The goblins can stand up and fight for quite some time. My opponent also brought the Black Orc Big Boss, big double OG, triple OG himself, riding a war pig. He's going to be quite the force, but I've got his counter in the form of double Gorbull, so we'll check those guys out in a second. He also brought the Ragnarok Queen, Big Mama herself. You don't get to see her very often, but her spider summons are going to play quite a role in this battle, as well as a rogue idol, just a standard rogue idol, going to be here to kind of mash it up. Some terror, probably not bad. I can see what my opponent was thinking against most standard Beastmen builds, that this would be very good. And then Wurzag here on foot. He's got, you know, several spells. We'll go over them in a second, but this is going to be kind of an odd caster on caster battle between Malagor and Wurzag. So we've got Effigia to get probably his best ability, allowing him to tie down any unit he wants, really, and then kind of pin them in place long enough to get a headbutt or a brain burster. He also has, here we go, to give 40 melee attack. Lots of buffs. The Bonewood Staff will trigger whenever he casts, as well as Squiggly Beast, giving him increased power recharge rate. And he's got Wurzag's Revenge, doing a map-wide 100% miscast chance whenever you stand next to him and cast. But that's not going to be an issue for us, thankfully. Because taking Malagor, I only took 1 spell, and that's going to be the Cygor summon. I don't anticipate Malagor to live very long. I wanted him to be cheap, and I wanted to have a caster for sure. Against the greenskins in particular, I find the double Cygor to be very good. Not a lot of greenskin players are willing to do the Doom Diver Catapult meta, so what you'll get is the range advantage. So I had some Warhounds vanguarded over here in the trees, hidden. I also had another group vanguarded on the corner. I didn't know how my opponent would deploy, and of course I didn't know what their build would be exactly. But this whole battle is going to come down to 2 things. Who can win the mosh pit battle? Because obviously we've got monsters aplenty. And who can control the most space? And it's going to be a constant battle between my opponent's 6 units here and then my 4. And you'll see what I do to try to control the space as the battle gets going. My front line is a much higher quality than my opponent, so we should win there. We've got Gore Herds with shields, and then on the flanks we have just the Ungore Herds with shields as well. So we hit much harder than the Goblins. And then a back line of Minotaurs with shields, going to help them to survive any type of firepower play I was kind of expecting from my opponent. I was expecting lots of Goblin Archers. They didn't show up, but just in case, you know, these guys have silver shields, but they also still do armor piercing. So a little bit better melee defense as well than their other kin. And then the double Gorbull for the win. These guys, armor-piercing, anti-large. They're going to be my monster killers. But you're going to see I have some problems this battle trying to keep them on target. They still get knocked around. I don't know if it's a mass issue or what. But they also can get stuck behind their own units, and then they find themselves not doing much. So my opponent was doing a really good job as we go ahead and get back to regular speed. And we can go ahead and drop this as well. I think you guys know what units we're dealing with here. I'm going to peel off 1 Ungore Herd. Very cheap unit. And I'm just going to use them to try and tie down all of these ranged units. If he could just get in there, if they could just get in there, get a couple kills. They have shields. Are they silver shields? They're not. They're regular bronze shields. I don't really want to turn them around. So I'm just going to keep them in this fight. Chase whatever you can, man. Distract whatever you can. My opponent was doing some pretty slick Cygor dodging, so I was constantly having... You can see here I summoned my first Cygor. I was constantly having to change targets. But here I'm going to go ahead and realize that my opponent wants to keep this skirmishing battle going for as long as possible. And I think he sees that I'm making a pretty nice play. That was a nice brainbuster there for my opponent. I actually didn't catch that in the middle of the battle, and I was wondering how I got tanked so quickly. But that was very well timed. He's making a bit of a concave. I'm not going to go into it. My units are going to rout, but they will rally. You expect these types of low-tier units to rout. And I'm just going to be constantly switching targets with my Cygor. I'm not bringing them in. We will, however, we catch the Ragnarok Queen exposed, but with a summon of Spider Hatchling, she's able to give herself a buffer so that my Minotaurs can't get directly on her and chew her to pieces, which did indeed suck. But charging back in is going to be the Black Orc Big Boss, and as well as the Rogue Idol. So I wasn't going to turn this into a monster mash, but my opponent decided to make that happen. He's not going to chase off my Warhounds, which is going to prove a costly mistake. I would have taken one of these units, probably a Wolf Rider, and chased these two units off. That would have been very valuable, as well as this unit. But I took kind of the long con. I brought my Warhounds from the other side all the way back around. Another Brainburster going off. Good casting for my opponent. And I'm going to try to envelop and entrap some of these Forest Goblin Spider Riders, enough to do some serious damage, which we have done. Cygor's still throwing rocks, and they're just going to be getting their value as much as they can throughout this game. I was hoping to blob up the Forest Goblins, but you'll see there a swing and a miss from my Cygor. See if any of these really connect. A little bit here and there. Not a lot of kills so far. It might have been better to bring this Cygor honestly in and have a monster mash with the Rogue Idol. One of my Minotaurs, I wasn't willing to commit to the blob fight, so I brought them up and around in an attempt to continue to keep these range units out of this fight. I don't want them able to sit here next to this blob and just shoot in. My Minotaurs, my Gors, my Ungors even, they're all doing the best work that they can. And I'm keeping Malagor right next to us, because his job is going to be, with his ability, which I haven't talked about yet, and a nice rear Spider Hatchling summons from the Ragnarok Queen once again. His job is to use his ability, Icons of Vilification, to give 12 leadership to this blob. So my units are barely shaking at all, even though some of them are badly damaged, even though they're being inflicted with terror. Between the Icons of Vilification and the Encouragement aura, my units are standing strong. Heavy damage notwithstanding. One of my Cygors is about to crumble out of the battle, and there he goes. My other Cygor still doing great, still doing well. And I managed to corral my opponent's ranged assets off to the side of the battlefield where they just don't matter. They're wasting all their ammunition, they're wasting all their time, they're shooting at things that cost me almost no gold. Rogue Idol doing some belly flops here. And I'm using the Warhounds that I have left as a bit of a cleanup crew to chase off some of these goblins, that way they can't come back to the pit fight. Because the one thing my units don't want is to be inundated with cheap goblin infantry while they're trying to pin down and kill these heavily armored, monstrous units. So Wurzag's going to take a bit of a beating. At this point, I decide to put both my Gorbulls on Wurzag. Let's see how long it takes for my opponents to realize. He's probably already, just based on the way that Wurzag is facing, trying to get him out of the blob and safely away. Malagor doesn't need to fight. All he has to do is stay close for now. At some point, I'm going to bring him in. We've managed to hit Bob, and Bob is beaten all to hell, and he's going to try to run. We're going to chase him if I can, but he's pretty fast. I don't know if I realized at the time that he was on the War Pig. At 62 speed, my Gors aren't going to be able to keep up, but Gors are unusually fast. They're 43 speed, so they'll be able to chase him quite a bit away from this blob. Keep any type of, leadership that he might provide to this fight out of the way. The Ragnarok Queen down below, about 40% HP. The Rogue Idol going down a bit. You see its leadership starting to tank, and we can actually hover over it and see what exactly it is that's causing it to do so. Wurzag is getting absolutely beaten on, but you'll see my Gorbulls having to constantly return to the battlefield. I bring in my Warhounds at this pretty critical juncture here. The Ragnarok Queen was trying to escape, and I just had to bring them in and pin her in. even though I knew they were going to get crushed. We've got the Cygor on one side and the Warhounds on the other. They bought enough time for me to do the critical damage that I needed to bring down the Ragnarok Queen. Wurzag's still managing to make it out. Look at my Gore Bulls. They've like dropped orders and they're just standing here. It's pretty frustrating. They had something to do, but they just lost it. They forgot. I brought Malagor in to try and get a little more damage on Wurzag, and Wurzag just staff stomps one of my Minotaurs and kills him. And I could tell that my opponent had decided to try and target Malagor with the Rogue Idol, but it's a little too late, as the saying goes, because I'm able to bring in the Minotaurs, use their mass, and I'm going to be following him. And I could just pull Malagor out. He's pretty fast for a Footlord at 38. I think he's faster than that. Yeah, he's 43 as most standard Gores are, I think. And he's just going to be able to outrun the Rogue Idol. No big deal, really. And check this out. So one of my Gore Bulls is being chased off by spiders, a pretty ignoble end. I'm constantly rallying my forces, as is my opponent. But I did something here that was pretty sweet. First swing there from the Cygor is a swing and a miss. I've got 7 ammunition left. And I see that my opponent's Wurzag is going to be trying to run. And then I probably won't be able to chase him. He's screening with goblins. But I figure the Cygor is somewhat accurate. All I needed was one lucky shot and boom goes the dynamite. Wurzag face plants. And that's going to be a heavy hit to the resolve of the greenskins. And you know, from that they go down. It was already a close fight, but after Wurzag died, that was going to be it. And I wasn't quite able to chase off the... Man, I just call him Bob, because their names are so long. Black Orc Big Boss. There we go. I wasn't able to chase off the Black Orc Big Boss. He came back, but with only 300 HP, he could never really be a huge factor in this battle. But let's see what the damages shook out to be. A lot of damage dealt with Wurzag. Damage value, I'm sure he paid for himself. Bob's can be pretty cheap. That probably was pretty effective as well. The thing is, my opponent took all of these archer units, and even though they did a lot of damage, they did it to some of my cheapest units. I would say probably MVP for my opponent was the Ragnarok Queen. She tanked tons of damage. You'll never get to see how much damage the spiders did or how much damage they absorbed, probably more to the point, and how much they prevented, because they also apply poison. They were poisoning my entire blob, keeping me from being as effective in combat as I would have liked to have been. And then, of course, Malagor was only there for leadership and Cygor support, while we've got our 2 Gore Bulls who pretty much paid for themselves. They're I think they're about $1,000 a piece. So on average, they pay for themselves. I've got my sacrificial Ungors here. They just had to take one for the team this battle, while the actual Gores did a ton of damage. They did just fine. And then a lot of screening there. The Minotaurs were, of course, the heavy hitters, and I think on average they more than got their value. They didn't go into this fight with chevrons, so that tells you right there how much work they actually did. And then the Cygor, while not quite paying for himself in terms of the numbers that we see here, what you don't see is the fact that he was nearly full health at the end of the battle. So he was still a mighty force that my opponent would have needed to deal with, as well as he still had some ammunition left. And, you know, he was kind of waiting to accrue more value. And then, of course, in Malagor, what you don't see is that he had 2 other Cygors the entire time getting value. If I could change anything that I did this battle, I would have brought my summoned Cygors into that Mosh fight. I just didn't think that it was going to devolve the way that it did, into a pit fight and then a screening fight. But it was very interesting. I was using all my micro, not so much in the pit fight, but in these constant reallocation of Warhounds and Ungors and Cygor targets in an attempt to keep this huge blob of ranged units away from the pit fight. But guys, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys are as hyped for the new DLC coming up as I am. I'll probably do something more like a skink themed or a chameleon skeep themed army in the next episode. Hope you guys look forward to that. This one I wanted to go a little more Minotaur heavy. Gore Bull. If there was already a Minotaur Lord in the game, I would have 100% gone for it. But I'm sure we're probably not getting Doom Bulls until the DLC. But that's it, guys. Thank you so much. My name is Brett. Channel's Goodtalk Gaming. And as always, y'all, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.